أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أشهد أن علي ولي الله اللهم صل على محمد وآله أشهد أن علي حجة الله اللهم صل على محمد وآله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأولية والقدم ووسم كل شيء ما عداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال عز شانه كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه وكل نفس ذائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يعزب عنه ماس العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقة العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خير يرى ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شر يرى نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يعذب من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحمه من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيئين عدل وعفوه تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينتهم نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ضل فغرق وهوى أوصيكم عباد الله بالاعتصام بالتقوى فإنه حبل متين وأروة وثقى فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولو أنهم رضوا ما آتاهم الله ورسوله وقالوا حسبنا الله سيؤتينا الله من فضله ورسوله إنا إلى الله راغبون صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات بجمع محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I begin by advising myself and all of you to adopt the taqwa of Allah as is the best of provisions. The verse that I recited is from Surah Tawbah, ayat number 59, continuing with the discussion that we had last night regarding the days in which we commemorate the shahadat of our sixth Imam, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. and the concepts that this sixth Imam of ours laid down and established, and the madhab which was revived, it would be the better word to say, revived by this Imam of ours when it was really facing a turmoil towards the end of the first century. I chose this ayat which translates as this. And if you look at these ayat, you find that within them, many of the responses and the ishkalat, the critiques that are raised by others are resolved and answered in these ayat. Sometimes, of course, the ayat is technical and a person has to derive the meaning from it, and not the meaning, the law from it, but sometimes it's just straightforward, and it just tells you as far as that aqidah is concerned. So, see, inshallah, if you can pick out the aqidah that I'm trying to address from the translation of the ayat that I recited. It says, it would have been better if they had been pleased with what Allah and His apostle gave them. I'll repeat. It would have been better if they were pleased with what Allah and His apostle gave them. What is the concept that is mentioned usually? Who bestows? Who gives? The Zat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If the Zat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the giver, why is it then the ayat number 59 of Surah Tawbah says that it would have been better if they had been pleased with what Allah and His apostle gave them? And He said, Allah is sufficient for us. Allah and His apostle will give to us out of His grace, and indeed to Allah do we eagerly turn. And of course, I explained the reason why I recited this ayat and the concept which I alluded to, that the concept of giving and the concept of bestowal. Of course, to further elaborate, 4 steps are mentioned in this verse. Number 1, being content and pleased with the decree of Allah and the Prophet. So whatever they have given to you, be content with that. وَمَا رَضُوا مَا أَتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. Radu. Be pleased, be content with what has been given to you by Allah and His apostle. Verbally saying that Allah is sufficient. وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَ اللَّهُ. Uttering this fact, admitting to it, acknowledging it. Number 3, having hope in the grace of Allah and Prophet. Allahu min fadlihi wa rasuluh. Fadl of Allah, grace of Allah, and the fadl and the grace of Rasulullah. And then turning eagerly to Allah, showing descent toward the world. Ilallahi raghibun. These are the 4 steps that you find in this ayah. One day, one of the contemporaries of our 6th Imam, Imam of the Hanafi madhab, Abu Hanifa, was having, lunch or food with our 6th Imam. Imam raised his hands to praise Allah and he said, Allahumma inna hadha minka wa min rasulika. Imam purposely did that because there are reasons that, the actions of ma'asumin are not void of hikmat. Imam said, Oh Allah, Allahumma, in making this dua, when we eat food, we make dua. Oh Allah, thank you for this food that you have given to us, for example. He said, Allahumma inna hadha minka wa min rasulika. Oh Allah, this food is from you and from your Prophet. Upon hearing this, Abu Hanifa quickly said, Aj'alta ma'allahi sharikan? Did you associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because the food is clearly given by who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By saying, Oh Allah and the Prophet, thank you for providing this food to us. Aj'alta ma'allahi sharikan? Imam replied, Allah says in chapter 9, verse 74, وَمَا نَقَمُوا إِلَّا أَنْ أَغْنَاهُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. There is no other reason for their ungratefulness except that God and His Messenger enriched them through their favors. Response is that Allah and His Messenger are both enriching them with their favors. Upon hearing this ayat, Abu Hanifa said, كأني ما قرأتها قط في كتاب ولا سمعتها إلا في هذا الموقف. It is as if I had never heard this ayat before, Or even if I had recited it before, never thought of it in this way. It is normal. How many times have you finished Quran? Many people finish Quran. They have a habit of reciting Quran on a daily basis. And especially in the month of Ramadan. We read through and we go through the ayat of Quran. But then only when you hear a majlis on a specific ayat, you say, oh yeah, now I think about this ayat in this way. Because I haven't really thought of that ayat. We just, read through it. And sometimes you ponder over the translation of certain words, and then you just move on. This Imam of Hanafi, he's saying, كَأَنِّي مَا قَرَأْتُهَا قَطُّ. It is as if I had never recited this ayat before, وَفِي كِتَابٍ وَلَا سَمِعْتُهَا إِلَّا فِي هَذَا الْمَوْقِفِ. Nor have I heard of it only until upon this point. Imam also recited the following ayat, which I recited for you, Surah Tawbah, verse number 59. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ رَضُوا مَا آتَاهُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُ. If it had only been better if they were pleased with what Allah has given to them and His Prophet had given to them. Thus Imam is making dua, oh Allah, this is from your fadl, this food which is sitting in front of me, and this is from the fadl of your Prophet, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Of course, we're not trying to mock the Imam of Hanafi madhab. The only point is to iterate over here is that a lot of time there's lack of attention toward the ayat, which clearly highlight the misunderstood notion of Tawheed and Shirk. Of course, Tawheed and Shirk are the cornerstone. Tawheed is the cornerstone and the first and the foremost thing for which every Nabi stood up. So why do we need to talk about Tawheed in this day and age where we should be discussing the matters of other importance that are being faced by, for example, us as adults, as youngsters, as kids going around? I will highlight and allude toward the unfortunate incident that took place a few days ago in Texas and some of the reasons that we can derive from it associated with this ayat that I recited for you. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So therefore Imam said, in the same sitting where Imam was sitting with him, so there were many aqaidi aspects that Imam ﷺ clarified for him. He said, what do you think about the concept where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Takathur, ثُمَّ لَا تُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. I heard that you interpret this ayat that na'im refers to the ni'mat of food and drink from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, isn't it so? Abu Hanifa responded, isn't it so that we should be thankful to the food and the drink that Allah? No, just a little while ago, Imam himself thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet for the food that he had given. But then this ayat was raised. Look at the connection that Imam is drawing over here, where this person can easily go ahead and contradict Imam. Now, a moment ago, you thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet. Now you're saying, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. That indeed, for sure, we will ask them about the ni'mat, an-na'im, on the Day of Judgment. And so right away he said, yes, it means the food and the drink. And you just praised food and drink, thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam then gave another inspo. He said, imagine if you invite someone to your house, a guest that you've invited, they finally accept your invitation, they come to your house, you provide them food and you provide them with the water and other drinks, and then when they are done eating, you go ahead and ask them for compensation. Will you do that? You say, well, at least thank me for having invited you. Of course, the guests who come, they always thank out of courtesy, thank you for inviting us, thank you for having us, all that stuff. But then a person does not really go out of the way and say, oh, you have to thank me as well before you leave the house. Or you have to pay me for what you have given to me. He said, no, nobody does that. He said, when you and I, as human beings, with limited, with limitations that we have, is still when we invite a guest to our house, when we provide them with food and drink, we don't ask for any compensation. You think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is Kareem, who provides for all of mankind, He's looking for a compensation back in return? He's looking for thankfulness. My servant, go ahead and say thank you, Allah, or any other way of compensating. He said, that's what I thought all this time. Imam said, no, when it says, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ, it's not the ni'mat of food and drink that is a basic ni'mat that is provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to everyone, whether he believes in Him or doesn't believe in Him. It is the ni'mat of us, Ahlul Bayt alayhi wassalatu wassalam, that Allah has given to you. That is the ni'mat for which Allah will question on the Day of Judgment. How did you squander the ni'mat of Ahlul Bayt that was given to you? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So that was the second discussion. Hubbuna Ahlul Bayt. Imam said, this na'im which is being referred to in this ayat is Hubbuna Ahlul Bayt, is the love of us Ahlul Bayt. And then Imam gave those discussions that you have heard in the past as well, where Imam questioned him. He said, which is greater sin? Because he also used to do what is called qiyas. He said, I've heard that you use qiyas, meaning you compare ahkam ilahi. If this is like this, then this is also like that. He said, yes, I use that. It turns out to be a very good tool for me to derive the laws of Islam. Imam says, awwalu man qasa iblis hina amara bis-sujud li Adam fa aba wa qala khalaqtani min nar wa khalaqtahu min tin. Is the first one to do qiyas and show a comparison was Iblis when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered him to go ahead and do sajda in front of Adam. He said that you created me from fire and you created him from clay. How is it that a fire go ahead and do sajda to clay? Imam then said, which is a greater sin, murder or adultery? He says, of course, murder is a greater sin. He said, then why is it that for murder you only need 2 witnesses, for adultery you need 4? If this was a grave sin, then it would have had more witnesses than the other one. Well, that's not the case. Murder has only 2 witnesses, while you need 4 witnesses when it comes to adultery. Then Imam says, what is superior, fasting or salat? He said, of course, salat. Salat is amududdin. It is the pillar of the religion. It is superior. Imam said for women who are in their periods, when they miss their salat, there's no qadha upon them. But when they miss their fast, they have to make up the qadha of the fast that they have given. How can you go ahead and do this sort of comparison? And how can you go ahead and do this sort of qiyas? And then Imam gave other examples as well. Funny thing is, just this morning, someone sent me amongst a group, now of course these, sometimes you get these forwards, sometimes they're beneficial, sometimes they're absolutely garbage, but sometimes they're things that, are eye-opening. There was this renowned scholar from Ahl Sunnah who was reciting this incident between 6th Imam and Imam Abu Hanifa. That Imam was giving him this, examples of qiyas and refuting each one of them, saying that which one is superior, fasting or salat, which one is superior, as far as qatl or, killing someone or adultery, and all of these 4 or 5 scenarios. He said, and first of all he said it was with 5th Imam and not with 6th Imam. Fine, if it was 5th Imam. He said when 5th Imam was speaking like this to Abu Hanifa responded by saying, my aql says that this should be bigger. But because your judge has said this is how it should be, sama'an wa ta'atan, I also go ahead and give a hukum according to the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Completely changed the discussion at hand. While he later on agrees to it when Imam opens the eyes and when Imam tells him by this comparison which is superior, salat or sawm, and then gave him an example that women have to make up the qadha of one and don't have to make up the qadha of the other. And then Imam gave him the answer. Why? Because if they were to miss 7 to 10 days every month for salat, it will be too much of a burden upon them. But fasting is only wajib for 1 month in the entire year. 7 days making up is not that difficult. Or for example, as far as qatl or adultery is concerned, it'll be far more difficult to prove that someone has committed the act of adultery. Therefore, 4 witnesses are required to diminish and completely get rid of this scenario. And that is the reason. So Imam gave each example. But of course, this guy says, Imam Abu Hanifa said, my aql says otherwise, but I follow the command of Quran and Sunnah. And therefore, upon hearing this, Imam apologized to him and Imam then left the scene. Completely changed the discourse that 5th Imam or 6th Imam had it. The purpose of Imam Sadiq's discussion with Abu Hanifa was to disprove to him on the use of analogy in religious matters. What the Imam means is that man's immediate judgment and logic cannot discover the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without the textual references that have been provided by the Holy Prophet, Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. Of course, there's explanation for each one of those things that Imam had questioned. And therefore, bringing you towards the conclusion, one of the questions that Imam had asked him is that, which one is more najis? The urine or the fluid, which is of course semen, which one is more najis? And of course, he said, of course, the urine is more najis. And Imam said, why is it that after the first one, you only have to do wudu, and after the second one, you have to perform the ghusl? If this is more najis, if it's unjust, then you should be doing ghusl for this one and not for that one, vice versa. If according to your aql and qiyas, you were to go ahead and derive this law. He said, why is it? What is the purpose behind it? Imam said, on average, every person visits the restroom 4 to 5 times a day. Imagine if they have to use the restroom for 4 or 5 times a day and have to do ghusl every time they visit. It will become a burden. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came or brought this and sent this religion, and Rasulullah came with this religion to make life easy for mankind and not make it to be a haraj and difficulty upon the followers. Moreover, the concept of praying and offering salat and all of those things that were mentioned, and there was a further discussion about it as well. In fact, Imam, when proving some of these things, the author of Tarikh Baghdad, he writes that Imam Shafi'i, the second big Imam after Imam Abu Hanifa, the Madhab Shafi'i, the leader of the Shafi'i Madhab, he used to pray at the grave of Hazrat Abu Hanifa. He used to say, Inni la atabarraku bi Abi Hanifa wa aji'u qabrahu kulla yawmin. I take blessings from the qabr of Abu Hanifa and I come to his grave every day. فَإِذَا عَرَضَتْ لِي حَاجَةٌ. If there ever is a hajat upon me, صَلَّيْتُ رَكْعَتَيْن. I would offer 2 rakat salat. وَجِئْتُ إِلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ. And I would come to his qabr. وَسَأَلْتُ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى الْحَاجَةَ إِنْدَهُ فَمَا تَبْعُدْ أَن تُقْضِيَا. I would ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for my hajat near the grave of Abu Hanifa. And it was not a case that ever my hajat was turned down. Now, who do you go ahead and follow? Who do you go ahead and listen to when our Ahlul Bayt are telling that visiting the graves of Ahlul Bayt and visiting the graves of the saints, you're not going there to worship them? In fact, the turnaround would be that is the reason all the graves of Baqi are demolished. The person whom we are discussing here today, our 6th Imam, Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, is amongst those ma'asumeen whose grave was also demolished. And still till this day, if you go for Umrah and Hajj, you're not allowed access to be next to the grave of these ma'asumeen. Bringing you towards the close, again, we are horrified by the brutal acts of gun violence carried out in our nation. Of course, we condemn all forms of violence and call our legislators to enact meaningful changes in our nation's gun laws. Within a 10-day span, a white supremacist went on a shooting rampage at a Buffalo supermarket. That was only 10 or 12 days ago, leaving 10 innocent people dead. A man went to politically charged shooting spree in a Southern California church, leaving 1 person dead, which we probably didn't even hear about. And then on May 24th, just a few days ago, a teenage boy walked into Robb Elementary School in Texas and committed one of the greatest or the largest school shootings in the history of this nation. Well, every time this sort of incident takes place, we stand here and we condemn. But when we condemn those who carried out these attacks, we also need to understand that there are systems in place that allow such horrible acts to continue to happen. You can't just stand before the nation and you can't just stand before the grieving families and imagine the children aged 7 to 10. The horrible scene, of them being cornered inside their classroom and the person with a gun in his hand and just going on a shooting rampage. These innocent kids, there's no way to run for them. And the teachers are basically becoming the shield to protect these kids. Just imagine the horrible situation. And then you look at those innocent kids who, of course, probably had bright future ahead of them. Many of you have children of that age. Many of you have children that are going to school. And every time something like this happens, we fear for our children's safety and security as well. And this is something which, of course, our nation has failed to address because there are certain institutions that are just too strong for even the legislators to stand in front of. While we respect the Second Amendment, why is it so easy for people to access not only guns, but automatic guns and other tools of war? Enforce background checks, make it difficult for people, especially teenagers, to gain access to assault weapons. We know we need to take actions. Urge your legislators to work for sensible gun laws that would protect us all. Nobody's, feeling safe at the moment. While we look at our own institution, what measures do we have as far as protection? Yes, we have great trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our trust is first in Allah. We put our trust. But then even Allah says, make sure that you go ahead and don't throw yourself into halakat. Right? Don't throw yourself into halakat. When there's a danger, you got to protect yourself. You can't just walk into the danger. So with that said, it is important that we take swift actions. This is a country where, of course, there are many good things. You can go ahead and approach and put pressure, maybe statewide, if not the countrywide, in order to go ahead and curb some of these laws, which, of course, allow, without background checks, these guns and assault weapons to be accessed by teenagers, who, of course, without realizing the cause, the pain, and the fury that they're causing to the bereaved families and the communities as well. I don't understand how the children, other children who are traumatized by this when going to the same school, how can they ever walk into the same school again? And when they do eventually go back to the same school, will they feel safe? No, they won't. So this is where we need to be playing our role as far as the citizens of this country to go ahead and make sure that these incidents don't happen again. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and ability to follow these commands and the teachings of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wassalam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of our weighted Imam. Inna asal hadith wa ablagh al-mawidha kitabullah a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim wal 'asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحليم الكريم وغافر الذنب وقابل التوب وهو الغفور الرحيم سبحان من سبقت رحمته غضبه وبسط اليدين بالرحمة سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا إلا دون وسعها وعفى عن السيئات ولم يجاز بها سبحان من لا يزداد على معاصي العباد إلا كرما وجودا ولا كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفحا نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو ولا طوف على العباد بجوده ولا عباد المظلمين بحلمه ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المظلمين بعثه رحمة للعالمين ألا قد أمركم الله في محكم كتابه بالصلاة على نبيه وحبيبه فقال تعليما لكم وتشريفا للصفي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليهم الصلاة والسلام اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان ما هي آثار البدع والطغيان هادم أبنية الشرك والنفاق حاسد فروع البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آبائه الكرام اتصلت الليالي والأيام. اللهم عجل فرجا وسهل مخرجا واكحل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه، وتفضل على أمرائنا المؤمنين بمزيد التوفيقات وازدياد الإقبال وعلو الدرجات. اللهم افعل بنا ما أنت أهله ولا تفعل بنا ما نحن أهله، بجاه محمد وآله المعصومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. ممن يذكر فتنفع ذكره. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار بجاه محمد وآله الأطهار. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العلى وبحمد. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته يقوم ويقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين بجاه محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. تسبيح جناب فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. All of us together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة لابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. क्या हुआ? Let's recognize the sponsors for today's Jummah lunch. It's the family of Dr. Amir Rizvi and his family, of course. Please recite a Surah Fatiha for their deceased relatives as well as your Surah Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله الصمد لم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يكن له كفوا أحد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Also, there's a request for Surah Fatiha for Marhuma Haidari Begum Hussaini, also known as Malka Musvi, bint Syed Rizwan Musvi. She passed away earlier today, this morning, mother-in-law of our brother Haider Khan from Jaffar School. So please recite a Surah Fatiha for her as well. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير الضالين. صلى الله محمد وعلى. There's a couple of announcements. Inshallah, today we have our first inaugural program for the seniors initiative. Inshallah, we'll see how, the interest as if developed right after Salatul Asr. We request our senior citizens, and if you think that you're not senior, that's okay. You can still join to join us for this luncheon. Inshallah, we will just brainstorm. We'll sit down and we'll this inaugural. I'll announce a few things regarding it, what we have in plan. And inshallah, just an hour-long discussion, maybe get to learn from one of our seniors, their experience, which definitely will be beneficial for the younger generation growing up. And, of course, there's no price to the valuable experience a person goes through in their entire life, and that's irreplaceable. So definitely something. And then there are other ideas, inshallah, which we'll be discussing. So right after Salatul Asr at 2 p.m. In the banquet hall, you can bring your tabarruk, your lunch, with you downstairs, and you can sit down on the table and you can eat, and inshallah we'll have that program. And tonight also, there's a youth program at 8 p.m. Inshallah, we'll start with a discussion, followed by Salat, which is around 8:42, 8:43. And inshallah, we'll have some games for them lined up as well. So today, right now at 2 p.m., the seniors program, and inshallah at 8 p.m. tonight for the youth. Do take part in both of these programs if you belong to these two categories. Let's recite 5 times Amma Yujib for all of those people who are in need of dua, those who are suffering, struggling, going through a difficult time in their life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring an end and give them quick recovery. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض أإله مع الله قليلا ما تذكرون. Before proceeding to Salatul Asr, just start your weekend right. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and inshallah on Monday as well. We will have Salatul Fajr starting here at 5 a.m. After that, inshallah, we will have discussion on Saturday and then dua on Sunday. And we have hot breakfast, which is served, freshly made. So make sure you can start your day correctly on this coming weekend and inshallah on the weekends that come along. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العالى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العالى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته يقوم ويقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته يقوم وأقعد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. تسبيح.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام، وأسأله أن يتوب علي توبة عبد ذليل خازن فقير بائس مسكين مستقيم مستجير، لا يملك لنفسه نفعا ولا ضرا ولا موتا ولا حياة ولا نشورا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من نفس لا تشبع، ومن قلب لا يخشى، ومن علم لا ينفع، ومن صلاة لا ترفع، ومن دعاء لا يسمع. اللهم إني أسألك اليسر بعد العسر، والفرج بعد الكرب، والرخاء بعد الشدة. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
There today will recite the ziyarat of Hazrat Abu Talib alayhi salam. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum Sayyid Batab Abna Raisiha. Assalamu alaikum Wasil Badat Wasil Kabata Badat Asisiha. Assalamu alaikum Kafir Rasulullah Ya Hafiz Din Allah Ya Ammal Mustafa Ya Abul Murtaza. Assalamu alaikum Ya Walat al Aimat al Khuda Kafaka Bima Awlaka Allahu Sharfan wa Hasban wa Hasbuka Bima Ataka Allahu Izzan wa Hasban. अस्सलाम अलैकुम या शरफ़ वजूद या वली मबूद या हास नबी मऊद। अस्सलाम अलैकुम या मन रज़क़ा वलदन हुवा खैर मौलूद। अस्सलाम अलैकुम या मन खुस्सा बिल वलद ज़कियत ताहिर मुत्तहर अलियस्तकुश मऊ मिनल अलिया हनिया लगा सुम्मा हनिया लगा मिन वलदिन हुवा अल मुर्तज़ा मिन रसूल व आखिर रसूल व ज़ौजल बतूल व सैफ़िल मसलूल हनिया लगा सुम्मा हनिया लगा मिन वलदिन हुवा मिन मोहम्मद अल मुस्तफ़ा बेमंज़िलत हारूना मिन मूसा हनिया लगा मिन वलदिन हुवा शरीक नबुवा वल मखसूसो बिल अखुवा व काशिफुल गुम्मा व इमामुल उम्मा व बिल आइम्मतिल हनिया लगा मिन वलदिन हुवा कसीमुल जन्नत व नार व नेमतुल लिल अबरार व निकमतुल लिल फुज्जार। अस्सलामु अलैहि व अलैहिम अजमाइन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलामु अलैकुम या अहलल बैत नबुव्वह जमीअन व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। अस्सलाम अलैकुम या साहिब अल-असर व ज़मान, या खलीफत रहमान, या इमाम अल-इंस वल जान, या काबत अल-ईमान, द तफसीर अल-फुरकान। अस्सलाम अलैकुम या शरीक अल-कुरआन, अस्सलाम अलैकुम इमाम ज़मानना अज्जलल्लाहु फरजक व सल्लल्लाहु फरजक व ज़ुहरक व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू।